every once in a while I put it on my bathroom mirror. It's 10 ways to pray for your husband. And if I'm not praying for you, I mean, I know people pray for you. People who know you pray for you, and people who know you pray for me because they know you, which, so I kind of get an added benefit. But I know your strengths and weaknesses better than anyone. And I need to be the one that's at the foot of the cross praying for you daily, for the temptations, for the weaknesses, for the wisdom, because I know what you're going through better than anyone else.
Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. We want to welcome you out to the Reality Is podcast, where real life and real faith are discussed. And today, I have my wife with me as we're talking about life and marriage and what the Lord has blessed us with for 40 years.
It's been a long time.
God has given us
it's a
that.
good long time, but a long time. Yeah.
Well, Joy, they've never met you. So I'm going to give you just an opportunity to maybe tell them just a little bit about you, and then also about maybe how we met, and just talk a little bit about how we got to where we're sitting today.
Well, we won't go into all of that because you haven't always been a preacher, but we went to high school together, and you asked me out. And actually, the first time you ever asked me out, I said no. And you were very persistent. You weren't used to being told no, I don't think, but that's how that happened. So fast forward, here we are today. We've got 2 beautiful daughters, grandchildren. God has brought us here at Crossroads to a wonderful church, and I'm just excited to be beside you doing ministry. I think it's a great life.
And it is. And 40 years this May,
Yep.
God has brought us together. And out of those 40 years, we want to take an opportunity today to share in for lack of a better word, just practical life experience,
Sure.
Making a marriage work.
Sure.
And so let me just set us up for just a moment and kind of go back and think about marriage scripturally. In Genesis 2:18, we find, and the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone, and I will make a helper comparable to him." The story continues in verse 20 as Adam or verse 24, Adam is starting to name all the animals. He's working through the naming process, and he realizes it's me, and there's nothing like me. And so the Bible says God caused the deep sleep to fall on Adam, and out of that, he created a wife. And so it's been well said that at that moment, God performed the first marriage ceremony there in the garden. And it simply tells us, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Now, Jesus in Matthew 19 reminded us how important marriage was. And there he said, talking to marriage, he said, "So they are no longer 2 but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let not men separate." So knowing scripturally that God has placed us together, God has put us together, I think there are some things that we can begin to talk about today. And you know, one of the things that we were fortunate enough is to have some good and godly people in our life that spoke into our life. And so
That's right.
let's talk about some foundations.
Okay. Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
2 things you just said. I love that God made woman out of man. And I think that's beautiful. And then I love the word helper, because God made me to be a helper to you. And I think that is my role. And that's what I love doing. And I'm thankful to God for that.
Absolutely. And so knowing that and realizing that God created us, brought us together, let's talk about some of these foundations.
Okay.
All right. And when we're talking about these foundations of marriage, again, we just want to make clear we're talking about just practical life experience.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so the first one that kind of comes to my mind is God made us distinct individuals.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yep.
so we need to let those differences work for us, not against us.
Yes. We are indeed polar opposites. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sweet, you're not.
Yeah,
I'm
that's-
quiet, you're not.
that's
So,
been accused.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're different.
And so, you know, after working with hundreds of couples over the years that I've been in ministry, I'm just convinced that opposites do attract.
I agree.
And as you said, that we're about as opposite as
Yeah.
we can get.
Yeah.
But we found a way to make that work.
Right.
And I would say that a lot of people allow the fact that they're different to become points of contention rather than points of cooperation in their home.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the foundations is to recognize and remember that the person you're married to is a very distinct individual.
Yeah. And one thing that I have learned to do is you push me, beyond where my norm is, like sitting here right now. This is not where I want to be or what I enjoy doing. But you compliment me, and you are very different from me. So I allow your differences to push me to become a better me. And I have to remember that.
And so when we're talking about a strong marriage, we're talking about playing off the strengths that one another has. And, we talk about being distinct individuals. Well, I can tell you now, if there were two Richards living in our home,
Heaven help us all.
there would be a killing.
Yeah, there would.
Because two of us couldn't live there.
No.
And so
sometimes one's a challenge.
Exactly. Easy now.
Okay.
But it does take two individuals.
Yes.
All right. And I think the other thing is, in knowing that we're individuals, we have to learn to extend grace to one another when those little annoyances of life come up.
Yeah. You don't annoy me.
No.
Well, maybe sometimes.
I don't annoy anyone.
No.
That's a known
You live
fact.
to be a blessing.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, one of the things that's true about us is there are things that all of us have. There's character traits, there's habits that all of us have that can be annoying.
Right.
And when you got two people living in close proximity inside a home, there has to be grace extended for that. And, all of us have good days, all of us have bad days, and we all have neutral days, if you will. And so I would say that over the years, we have learned to extend that grace to one another.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the most important things we have to learn to do.
I agree. Yeah, there are days that it's much easier to live with me, I know, and with you, and we learn to forgive a lot and overlook a lot. So.
And again, just sort of introducing where we're at. One of the things we've learned to do, and we want to talk about this and kind of maybe give some examples as we talk about if you're going to have a strong marriage and you're going to have that foundation, you've got to learn to serve one another.
Yes. I remember you went to a Promise Keepers rally early in our marriage, and I think that really was the turning point for our marriage. The theme of that Promise Keepers was outserve one another, not serve, but outserve. And that's actually one thing that annoys me about you at times is that you do outserve me. When I've got something I'm going to try to do for you, all of a sudden you've already done it. So that's a little annoying. But it also shows me how much you love me because your love language, and we've talked about love languages. Gary Chapman's written a wonderful book about that. Your love language is acts of service. And so, yeah, you serve me and you outserve me. And I think if there were more people like that in their marriages, they would be stronger.
Well, I would argue I don't outserve you.
You do outserve me.
But
yes, you do.
We kind of go back to that Promise Keepers, and I came back from the Promise Keepers, and we actually for years kept displayed and right in the forethought that a plaque, I will not be outserved.
Right.
And we lived our life that way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a one and done. And I would argue that so many more marriages would be so much stronger if they would quit waiting for their spouse to do something and move to outserve their spouse.
Yeah. I hear a lot of ladies talk about that. It's a big deal. So husbands take note.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so just serve.
Yeah.
And it's so important. And out of that service, we have to learn to prioritize our time in life.
Yes, we do.
And so,
Our calendars are very full. It's very hard. And we do prioritize time together as much as we can. But the one thing that I love is that even if we don't spend as much time as I would like, I know you're always there. If I needed you, you would be there. So I appreciate that.
well, and it is. And from the time we were married, and it really didn't matter. I had a job prior to ministry that kept me away, kept me traveling, kept me gone or very busy when I was home. And then ministry obviously is not a slow time of life either. But you've always known, and I believe that I can say this with confidence, you've always known that you were the priority. And it didn't matter what I'm doing or where I'm at, you were the priority.
And I also learned that it's okay to tell you that, honey, it's time to come home and spend time with me. It's time to come home and spend time with the kids. You've been gone too long or whatever, and you've always been open to that. And I don't say it in a mean way or hateful way. I just try to keep you out of trouble.
Exactly.
So,
and I think that's a great point because, we're going to talk a little more about that in a minute, but I think it's worth mentioning even now is you've got to communicate to one another.
Yes, you do.
When that time, that priority is not being met.
Right.
And if you fail to do that, then it's just going to multiply to the point that it becomes literally the straw that broke the camel's back, and you reach that point that it's very difficult to come back from.
Well, and it's on both of us. So if I just sit around and stew about it and get mad, shame on me.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell you and you don't do it, shame on you.
Exactly.
But
right. A good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right. And so it is a matter of making sure that we prioritize our time, and that time is important. And then out of that, another major foundation is openness in the relationship.
Yes.
There's just not room for secrets in the relationship.
Right.
And when you start hiding issues, the person hiding the issue becomes suspicious because they're fearful of being found out.
Right.
The one it's being hidden from becomes suspicious because it's obvious something's not fitting.
Right. But I also want to caution people, if there's nothing to be suspicious about, don't make it up. It will drive your partner crazy if you're always suspicious about things.
Good point.
So.
Good point. And so, but would you not agree, though, in a lot of situations that comes from someone who maybe has had a habit of keeping secrets?
Yes, or their past,
Right.
maybe not even with their spouse, but just
Right.
in their past they've
Exactly.
been hurt or something. So yeah.
So keep no secrets. And then this is one I think is a major foundation, and I really believe that it's been something that's helped us for 40 years, and it's something that I see that frustrates me for couples sometimes, and that is the lack of public support for each other.
Yeah.
And you've got to support your spouse in public.
Yeah, you do that very well. I've seen you do it too well at times. You remember that time you hit that person? You can't hit people. We don't hit people. But I felt very loved and supported when that happened.
I did warn them.
You did warn them
to leave you
shut
alone
up.
first.
Yes, but they did not. So.
And again, I've not always been a preacher.
That's true. That was before preacher.
But it is publicly supporting.
Yeah.
And we're certainly not advocating going out and
don't hit people.
beating someone up to
no,
prove to your
don't do
wife
that.
you love them. But we are saying that public support is absolutely essential. And you know what? You don't tear each other down in public or in private.
Or in
for
private,
that matter.
no.
But once you make your wife or your husband the brunt of the public joke, then you have begun to do damage to them.
And I see that person in such a smaller way.
Yeah.
They just diminish who they are in my eyes if they have to do that to their spouse.
Now, we're all about having fun and joking and playing, and that should absolutely be part of a marriage, and that should be part of friendships and relationships. But there is a difference in having fun with someone and having fun at their expense.
Exactly.
And sometimes you just got to speak up for your spouse.
Yeah. And life's hard enough. There's too many people out there beating others up, and we even beat ourselves up. So our spouse should be encouraging us.
And so foundationally, as we begin a marriage, as we start that journey, think through what it looks like to make sure you're always the cheerleader.
You are my biggest cheerleader.
Well,
I know that.
And it should be.
Yeah, you are.
Absolutely. And of course, I could go on and on about how you're mine. And for those listening, she thinks I can do anything.
Or you try.
I do.
YouTube has been good and bad for our life.
I've tore up a lot of things
Yes, you
because you
have.
thought I could do it.
Yes,
And so
you
I
have.
was proving I could. And so, that brings us to kind of this first introductory thought, and that is, you just can't keep a record of wrongs.
No. And I think about how God loves me unconditionally, and we've got to do that. Unconditional love for our spouse, because you're going to mess up, baby. Sometimes.
It is part of life.
Yeah.
And you know what? Great couples, strong couples learn to forgive.
Yes.
And they learn that the conversation's here and now. So if there's a problem we need to discuss, if you and I are sitting down to discuss that problem, and you go, well, in 1984 when we got married,
Yeah.
and we start the conversation there, then I can tell you, we're not going to come to a resolution.
No. And I don't want people remembering my wrongs from the past, and therefore I will not remember theirs.
And so we do start with no record of wrongs. And I think that we need to understand that once once you have come to resolution of a problem, you have got to move past that problem.
Leave
And
it alone.
You can't keep bringing it up.
No.
And so it's important. And so kind of setting the stage with those things we've talked about. And so let's just talk about some ways we got there
Okay.
and some ways that those joining us today can get there.
Okay.
And so, I think one of the most important things is we heard early on from again good and godly people that fed into our life is stop fighting in your marriage and start fighting for your marriage.
Absolutely. And we all know Satan is our enemy. It's not each other. And I think we need to remember that. Satan is out there to kill, steal, and destroy our marriages, our families, and we just can't let him do that.
Right,
So we fight together for each other.
Everyone loses when you fight with each other.
Yes.
And so when you find yourself in that circumstance, that situation where you're fighting in your marriage, then it becomes a battleground.
Yeah.
And then that battleground becomes an area that one or both do not want to be in anymore.
Right. And it's not fun.
No. And so fight for your marriage.
Yes.
And that's just I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And one of the ways that when I think about fighting for your marriage, I think about what you have to do is you have to quit asking God to fix your spouse.
Yes. Do you remember Alan and Melody Cox? They
Yes.
were our pastor when you went into ministry. Melody was his wife. And she said to me, pray for your husband. She said, don't nag him and don't try to change him. Don't try to fix him. Pray for him because God can beat him up far better than you can. So I've learned to do that. I pray for you every day. And if you need fixing or changing, I try to leave that up to God.
So
I have to help sometimes.
So let me get this right. You pray for God to beat me up every day.
I pray for God to
that's what
beat
I
you
heard.
up every day. Yes.
So it is a matter of you know what? If I spend all my time asking God to fix someone else,
Right.
then that's going to create a bigger problem.
And maybe that's not who God called them to be.
Well, the other side
so.
of that is it creates an atmosphere of self-righteousness.
Yes.
So I'm telling God how the person needs to be.
Right.
And I have found in my life, and we've talked about this so many times, when I begin to pray for God to expose the real problem, more often than not, it's me.
Right.
And so
It usually is you.
exactly.
I'm just kidding.
And so the Psalm 139 verses 23 and 24, it reminds us, search me, O God,
Right.
and know my heart.
Right.
Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. So I want you to notice the psalmist is not telling or praying for God to search someone else.
Right.
And
It's
so
my heart.
yeah, you got to start there. You absolutely have to start there. And so I think when we do that, that reminds us of that foundational truth that I can't ask God to fix you. I got to ask God to fix me.
Right.
And out of that, He'll fix us.
And I'm praying the whole time you are too, for God to show me where
Right.
I need to change. So.
And I think one of the ways that we learn that is by incorporating people into our life.
Yes.
And asking for help.
Yeah, and stop looking at social media
Yeah.
and all the perfect marriages and people out there because they're not there.
Right.
You and I talk to people every day, and we know for a fact there are hurting people out there, and people need each other. We need strong Christian friends in our lives.
And that's so true. And what happens is we find ourselves unwilling to ask for help
Yeah,
because we look at social media.
yeah,
And we just think that everything's perfect in their world, so they actually got their house cleaned for a whole 15 seconds and took a picture of it.
yeah,
They actually had the kids cleaned and dressed for, again, a whole 15 seconds to snap the quick picture. Look,
right.
we all live in the real world.
Yeah,
And so instead of thinking you're the only person that's ever had a difficulty in marriage, that you were the only person that's ever had maybe a difficulty learning to communicate or a difficulty learning to move past a problem, recognize that you're not the first and you certainly won't be the last.
right. And life is not perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
Yeah,
Ask your pastor, ask your friends, ask a good and godly confidant. And one of the things that we were told in early in our marriage is look for that godly couple that has the track record of marriage behind them, and seek advice and learn from that person.
Yeah. And they'll bring you up. I mean,
Yeah.
They encourage you and show you how to live and get through those hard times. So,
And so
we've
think,
had a few of those. It's been good.
Well, and so you got to ask for help. You got to let people speak into your life. Right. And by doing that, I begin to see my spouse through the Lord's eyes and not through my eyes. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is, if I am truly asking for help, if I'm truly asking God to search my heart, I'm seeking His will, not my will. Then out of that, I'm going to begin to see my spouse as the way God sees them, as His child.
Yes, and we love our children unconditionally, and that's how I've chosen to love you, is unconditionally.
And when I think about how does God want His child treated,
right?
And
I know it kills me if I think someone's hurting my child or my grandchild or something. I mean, so I'm protective of that, and I need to be protective of you and see you, like you say, through Christ's eyes.
See him as a child, and so out of that, I think one of the things that we have learned to do as well is to believe the best.
Yes.
About your spouse.
Yeah. It's easy to dwell on the negative, I think. Mm-hmm. But one thing I do appreciate about our marriage is that we don't, if something has to be said, we say it, but we don't dwell on that. Mm-hmm. And we choose to see the best in each other.
It is so important. 1 Corinthians 13 reminds us that without love, everything else is an annoyance. Mm-hmm. And that's literally what he's telling us there. Yeah. And I think it's important when we start seeing that I believe the best in my spouse, that love is a verb. It's not a noun. It's not naming something. It's doing something.
Right.
And so when you choose to believe the best of your spouse, then you're making a conscious choice.
Right.
I believe out of this, you learn to laugh with your spouse, not at your spouse.
Exactly.
And believe me, we have a lot of stuff to laugh at in our home.
We do, yeah. And something about laughing, that's one thing I think is so important in a marriage is laughter. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember, it was at a different church, but we'd gone out to eat, and there were 3 couples from the church that ended up at the same restaurant, and they sat there. I guess they were having a good time. I don't know. But when they finished eating, they came up to our table and said, I've never heard a family laugh as much as your family laughs together. And that was a compliment, right? Because that is something we do. And we see the best in each other. We have our weaknesses. We laugh at them sometimes. Mm-hmm. We can forgive them or whatever. But there's a lot that goes into a marriage. And
And I really want to kind of circle back a minute to say laugh with, not at.
Right.
Okay. Exactly. And it kind of goes back to making that your spouse the brunt of the joke.
Right.
Okay. We both have some interesting things we do in life, and we laugh often about how you'll start a project and then you'll get sidetracked and you'll go to a project and I come home and we have 10 half completed projects.
Right.
And we don't get mad about it. We laugh about it.
Yeah. And you help me finish them, or I hide them when you're gone. So.
And we laugh about the fire alarm as your gauge that it's
done.
Supper's
ready.
Time to get it out of the oven.
Supper's ready.
And of course, we don't have time to talk about the foolish stuff I do.
No, we don't.
But you know what? And it truly is. You just choose to believe the best.
Yeah.
And
I think you can do anything you decide to do. I really do.
Well, I think I can too.
I think you can. I know you think that. So.
But you know what? If you always assume the worst about the person you're married to, guess what you're going to find?
The worst.
Every time.
Every time.
And if I'm assuming the best, I'm going to find the best.
Yeah.
Okay, so they made a mistake. Well, who among us have not?
Exactly.
And okay, they're not perfect. Who among us is?
Right.
And so I think you just have to make that decision. And I don't say that in a vacuum, and I don't say that just because it's something that sounds good. I say that because for 40 years we've just made that decision.
Yeah.
And it is important we see that. One of the things that you have to do in this is also your spouse is not your servant.
No.
They're your partner.
That goes back to out serving each other.
Right.
And it's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? If I view you as my servant, then that gives me license to find your shortcomings.
Right. And I will respond so well.
Yeah. Yeah. We've learned that in 40 years.
Yeah.
If you see them as your opportunity to serve, it just changes the whole dynamic of your whole relationship.
And it's a blessing.
It is.
Yeah. It strengthens the marriage.
I can honestly say, I don't know how many times over the years, even long before I was in ministry, and I would have a guy say to me, my wife doesn't respond to me. My wife we're at conflict, or whatever the case is. And without exception, I'll circle back and I'll ask the same question: do you serve her? Mm-hmm. And most of the time, I get the deer in the headlight look, or I get a really foolish statement like, she doesn't deserve it. And then I remind them, well, you pretty well get what you deserve in life. And so they're not your servant.
Right.
You know, when we go back to what we read a moment ago, and the Lord created for Adam a helpmate, and he created her out of a rib. And it's been well said that he didn't create Eve from a bone in the head so she could rule over him, nor a bone in the foot so he could walk on her, but from a rib so she could walk beside him.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remember that. We need to remember that you're literally partners, you're helpmates in what you're doing.
And it can be fun.
It absolutely
if you'll do
can
it
be
together.
And you know, one of the other things that I really think is so important, and it's critical as we think about that, and that is you got to fight for time in your marriage, and I would go
have date nights
and include date nights.
Yeah, I agree.
You got to have them.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be a perfect date night. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It just has to be about the two of you.
Right. I think frog gigging is a great opportunity. You know,
you would. No,
I've just never got you to see that as an appropriate date night.
No, it's not. But and like I say, it doesn't have to be expensive. A few years ago, I can't remember if it was $10 or $20, but I gave it to our kids, our son-in-laws actually, because they were talking about they didn't have time to do anything, but they also didn't have the money to do it. Well, we grew up together. Actually, we were so young when we got married, and we didn't have any money, but we did stuff. And I don't know what happened to make people think they have to spend $100 to $200 for an evening out. So I gave the son-in-laws $20, I think it was, and I said, come be creative and have a fun night. And one of them, they went to a popular hot dog place. They stopped and got ice cream, and then they went to play pinball. And they said they had the best night that night. And they laughed, and they had a good time. And I think sometimes we forget date night is just for the two of us. It's to have fun. Right. So,
and that's a great point. You do not have to break the bank on date night.
No, life's too expensive now.
But I will say, you got to unload the kids.
Yes, you need to send the kids somewhere.
It's not family night; it's date night.
Family night's important, but time together is more so, I think, important.
But you know what? I'm a far better father when I'm settled in my role as husband.
Yes.
And you're a far better mother when you're settled in your role as wife.
Yes.
And I tell people often, God gave us each other before he gave us those kids.
Right. And the kids someday will be out of the house, which ours are.
Ours are. Don't let anybody ever tell you empty nest is a bad thing.
It's a good time.
And so, when we think about that, fighting for time, fighting for date night, we're in a season of life right now where we're taking care of people in our life.
Yeah, we are.
And so.
And that's hard at times.
Absolutely. And so when you have parents and when you have people that are close and special to you that you have to invest time in, or you get to invest time in. I hate using that word have to. And so I have people that I get to invest time in. It causes us to have to be more pointed about the time we spend.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I hear people tell me from time to time, I don't have the money for a babysitter. And there's a lot of options to that. The first comment I always make when somebody says, well, I don't have the money for a babysitter. I say, do you have the money for a divorce lawyer?
Yeah.
Because that's your next option. And so I think it's important that you develop those. Remember, we talked about developing those relationships with.
Get friends that have kids and swap.
Exactly. Yeah. Do share dates where they take your kids for a night, you take theirs. There's a lot of options. It just depends on how bad you want to do it.
Right.
And so I think it's important when you fight for that time, but also you don't have to spend a fortune.
No.
And fighting for that time, probably 20 years ago, my old recliner broke down. The old sit in your own single man recliner.
You only have a few things in life, and your recliner is one of them, and the remote. I know.
And you took my recliner away.
I know.
For the first time in our life at that point, out of necessity, because we didn't have any money, and there was a reclining love seat on sale that matched our sofa, but it was not bought with the sofa, but it matched it. And so
somewhat.
Somewhat. So we went from my recliner to the love seat, and even though now we are at a place, if we wanted to buy recliners, we could, but you couldn't run fast enough to put a recliner in our house.
No,
right?
Reclining love seats.
Exactly.
That's the way to go.
We love that. And I would just encourage you, you know what? Get rid of the recliner and buy a love seat to where she has to sit beside you, and I may
even touch you at times.
Exactly. and it's so important that you do little things like that. And our daughters laugh at us because we have our routine.
We have it down pat.
Exactly. Yes. And so we, in the evenings, we make our meal, and I do most of the cooking in the house. And so, but while I'm cooking, you're setting out the dinner trays and the plates. And now people are going, dinner trays. We don't ever use our table unless someone's there.
Right.
That
works for us.
Exactly. We sit in the love seat.
Yeah.
And our daughters laugh, and we never noticed it.
No, it's funny now.
Until one of our daughters was at the house, and she started laughing because we sit down at the same time. We look at each other, and then we pull the lever that brings our love seat up.
It's almost like we're one person when we're doing that.
And then we eat. And the other
one,
look
at each other,
and we then finish. When one's finished eating, they patiently wait for the other to finish. So normally it's me waiting.
Yeah.
And then we put our seats down at the same time.
Our legs do that at the same time.
And our girls just laugh at you. But you know what? We spend time together.
We've become one.
Exactly. And we spend time together. And all I'm getting at is, out of the necessity of needing a piece of furniture, we found a way. And let's be honest with ourselves. It was accidental. It wasn't on purpose, but we found a way to make time for us. And now it's who we are.
And sometimes you let me share your blanket.
Yeah, but that's by privilege only.
Okay.
And so it is so important that we fight for time, and you fight for those date nights. And you never reach an age where a date night's not important. No. So don't hear me say anything different. But I will say, when those kids are young and dominating your time, and they deserve your time, you're raising kids, and you have to invest in those.
But they can wear you out.
They will wear you out, and they will dominate all your time. And so you have to make sure you're capturing that time. I think back when early on, I mean, as soon as our first child came, you and I recognized that us getting away was important. And we were very blessed with your mom and dad who so invested in us, invested in our marriage from the beginning.
Yeah.
And they would they'd keep the girls, and you and I would be able to get a weekend away or a couple of days away. And it is so important. I remember I told you we did not have 2 nickels to rub together when we got married.
Nope.
And I remember asking you, what do you want to do for our honeymoon? Now, bear in mind, folks, when I say we didn't have any money.
We didn't have any money.
And you wanted to go to Hawaii.
Everybody wants to go to Hawaii.
And so I told you, I'll take you to Hawaii on our 1-year anniversary. We didn't go. Then I told you I'd take you on our 5-year anniversary.
We didn't go.
Right. But we did go on our 24.
24.
It was close to
24.
But it was.
And you know how we went? You said, when I get enough change in my change jar to buy the tickets, the airline tickets, we'll go to Hawaii. You know how that money got in those
Yeah,
changes?
you started using the power bill money and
No,
turning it into quarters.
I would get 20s at the bank. I'd get quarters, $20 worth of quarters at a time, and I'd just start sinking them into that jar.
But we planned for it,
Yeah.
and we prepared for it. And the really cool thing is, we told the girls we were going to Hawaii. Mama and Papa were coming in to stay with the girls, and our youngest,
poor thing,
just couldn't believe it.
She really thought we were taking her to Hawaii.
And she even packed her bag.
She was so pitiful.
And so she woke up, and you and I had already left, already gone to the airport, and she woke up the next morning and could not believe we actually went to Hawaii without her.
It was fun, though, wasn't it?
It was fun. And it was a whole lot more fun without her than it would have been with
her.
And so, we laugh, we joke, we play, but the truth of the matter is fight for time.
Yes.
Carve that time out.
Even if it's a cup of coffee in the morning or a walk in the evening.
Make that time a priority.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely important. And so when we're thinking about that, let's just kind of change gears a moment. If time is not there, if the date night is not there, then what are some things we can do with that? And communication is so important. And change in marriage, it doesn't happen by accident. It's something that has to be positive change.
Has to be intentional.
Has to be intentional. Yeah. And it takes communication to make that happen.
Right.
And so we can't expect to go through marriage without communicating. And we can't expect to go through marriage without problems. And so let me just say there's a couple of things that you have to do, and then I want to talk through some steps to resolution. First off, you got to learn to pray.
Right.
You pray together, you pray apart. But you got to learn to pray.
A lot. You pray a lot.
And
I actually have something, every once in a while I put it on my bathroom mirror. It's 10 ways to pray for your husband. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not praying for you, I know people pray for you. People who know you pray for you, and people who know you pray for me because they know you, so I kind of get an added benefit. But I know your strengths and weaknesses better than anyone. Mm-hmm. And I need to be the one that's at the foot of the cross praying for you daily, for the temptations, for the weaknesses, for the wisdom, because I know what you're going through better than anyone else. And
so after prayer, the next step in conflict resolution is approach one another respectfully.
Yes.
You can't come accusatory.
No.
And you can't start the conversation with, you know what, you're always.
No.
And so Let's talk about some ways now that we've learned, and again, these are not just steps written on paper. This is actually how we've learned to resolve conflict. Okay. And I think it's something that we practice in our home. It's something we practiced not only with you and I with resolving conflict over the years, but it's the same way we resolve conflict with our kids when there was a conflict with our kids. The first step in any conflict resolution is you got to let each party express how they feel about the situation.
Right. There's a right and a wrong way to do it, of course, too. And it may not come out right every time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can make it worse. I don't know if you remember a situation where one of our daughters got in big trouble. And it was on a Wednesday. You had not gotten home from church yet, but I was going to have to tell you what she had done. And I knew you were going to get really mad. And so the three of us practiced how we were going to tell Dad when he walked in the door what had happened. And you had had a long day, of course. And when you walked in, rather than me saying how I was going to say what I was going to say, it just went like that. It was a mess. You got mad and you went in a room. Megan got upset. She went running down the hall and slammed her door. And then Melissa looked at me and she said, "Mom, that is not how we practice that at all." So from that happened 30 years ago, 25 years ago. But that made me realize right then that communication is so important. How we do it, when we do it, take you into consideration, be a student of your spouse, know how they'll receive that communication. Because I set the whole tone for that evening, and it was horrible. So, yeah, you have to learn to communicate.
And you have to let them express.
Yes.
You cannot tell someone how they feel.
Right.
And so you also have to own your own feelings.
Yes.
You can't say to someone, "You make me feel."
No.
Okay. Now you can say to me, I feel, and then you're just expressing what it does to you. And I can't argue with what it does to you. but I can certainly argue that I'm not the one that did it to you.
Right.
Okay. And so let each one express their feelings. And that means that most difficult thing we do, we're quiet and we let them talk.
Yeah.
And so let each party express. And then out of that expression, you can't just air grievances.
Mm-mm.
Okay. What good does that do for us just to sit down and air grievances and say, okay, it's all out in the open now and walk away from it? What have we accomplished?
Nothing. And I think there's a time to do that. And sometimes certain grievances take longer to get over. But then don't let the other person keep dwelling on it. We've been in situations where we've been hurt or something has happened and we've communicated with each other. We've let each other work through it. But then we don't let the other person go back there or we don't let them stay there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been a good, strong point for our marriage.
Right. And so you have to move to resolution.
Yeah.
And out of that, there is no resolution if there's not a plan of action.
Right.
And so if all you do is air grievances and you leave grievances on the table, then really all you've done is hurt feelings.
Yeah.
Right. And so if there's a conversation, if you come to that point, then what's the plan of action? What will I do to resolve? What will you do to resolve? And then you hold each other accountable to that plan that you mutually agreed upon.
Yeah, and under promise and over deliver, mm-hmm. which is what people say about so many things. But
right.
Yeah, in a marriage, I think that's good.
Well, and the way you get there and the way you make that happen is in your communication is you're intentional about spending time together and talking. Mm-hmm. And you have to be intentional. I read several years ago that the average couple spends less than 20 minutes a week talking.
Wow. We spend more than that. I like to talk. Yeah. But you like to talk in the mornings and I like to talk in the evenings.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, I'm a morning person, you're an evening person.
I know.
But it really is important that you find that time and you find that ability to have that conversation. One of the things that we talk about in today's world is how busy we are.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, we have laughed. I don't know how many times we walk into a restaurant and there's a man and a woman sitting at a table and they both have their phone in their hand.
I know. It's sad, isn't it?
It
they
really
don't
is.
even talk anymore.
And you wonder if they're texting each other.
Yeah.
And you wonder, how often do they get to spending time together? And now that they're together, they're not even spending time together. Mm-hmm. And so you got to turn that technology off.
Yeah. But yesterday, remember you were sitting in your office and I was in my office. We were working and I called you.
Yes, you did.
And you said, hello, why are you calling me? I said, because I want to talk to you.
And we'll clarify home office. It's
we
not
were like 12 feet apart.
Right, it's not like I was at my church office.
No.
I was in my home office.
Yeah.
And we're literally 2 steps away. And you call me on phone. I look at my phone. I'm like, why is she calling me?
Yeah.
But you know what? You got to be intentional. And you got to spend time together. In that intentionality, it's not telling someone what they do wrong.
No.
It's telling someone how I'm feeling right now. And by communicating how I'm feeling right now, I'm then giving the person I'm talking to an opportunity to help make it right.
Yes. And help them make it right. Tell them.
But if I don't ever tell them, and I got to be specific.
Yeah.
I can't say, you make me feel bad.
Right.
Well, what do I do to make you feel bad? Well, I don't know. You just make me feel bad. Well, that's a big old topic.
Yeah.
Right? And so generalizing like you always, those statements are rarely, if ever, true.
Right.
No one ever always does anything.
Yeah.
And so we have to avoid that.
I try to really help you succeed in life. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have learned that if there's something that's important if it's important for me for you to do it, then I need to tell you that.
Well, and a lot of that comes down to realizing and recognizing that your spouse is not a mind reader.
Right.
And so if you're not communicating with that, then it's not going to happen. And so out of that, you have to learn to focus and move through that. Joy, we barely scratched the surface on things that we said we were going to talk about.
Yes, I know.
and we're out of time. It's been a lot of fun. The way I just want to quickly wrap up and talk about, the reality is there are some steps we can take. And I just want to quickly hit these and wrap this up. And first of all, I would argue you have to cultivate love daily.
Yes.
It's not a one and done. It's a daily exercise.
Learn your spouse's love language. 5 love languages, Gary Chapman.
Yeah, exactly. And it will be a great investment.
Change their life.
And so do that. Pray for your spouse.
Yes.
And, I hear guys look at me and they go, I can't pray with her. You know what? You can. And you
it
don't
will mean so much.
It does, and you don't have to spend again 30 minutes doing this. But you can pray with your spouse. Only say kind things about your spouse to your children, your family, and your friends. Okay,
Yes.
Don't be out talking about your spouse to people.
Enough people beat each other up.
Well, it's not only that. Once I communicate something negative about you to someone, they now have that negative impression of you.
They do.
And no matter how many times I tell them, well, you know what? I just was in a bad mood when I said that. I've still planted the seed of the negativity. And so don't do it. And whatever you do not condemn your spouse in front of your kids.
Yeah.
You don't do it.
Because they'll start looking for it.
What?
And then
they'll start looking for it, and they'll think it's okay to condemn as well.
Right.
And so don't do it. Be loyal in your thoughts.
Yes.
Your spouse should be God first, then your spouse, then your kids, then your job, and then your recreationals. And so often we flip that up to where somehow our recreationals, our private time, our person. No, that's not what comes first.
Right.
And so be that. And you're a team. Always recognize that man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife.
Yes.
And Christ said the two will be one. And so you become a team.
Yeah.
And so you fight your way through that. I think also we have to learn to associate with people who value our marriage. You put someone in your life that doesn't value your marriage, and they're going to cause you to wonder about your own marriage.
Yeah. And it's miserable being about someone who just wants to complain all the time.
1 Corinthians 15:33, as you know, we kept it on in front of our girls the whole time they were growing up. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits.
Right.
And so if I don't put people in my life that value my marriage, and I put people there that don't, they're going to make me question my marriage.
Right.
And I can't let that happen.
Right.
You got to learn to talk. I wish we had time to really develop this. Maybe someday we can come back and circle back to 1 Peter 3:7. Husbands likewise dwell with your wife with understanding. And that word understanding is a word of knowledge. It literally is a term of instruction. And
we are not that hard.
You're that hard.
We are not that hard.
Well, it all depends on which one of you I'm talking to. But
we'll talk about that at home.
Exactly. Understanding, though, if I'm going to dwell with you with understanding, it means there has to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And you're the teacher in that. Yeah. And so it is absolutely so important that you talk. And if you're not talking, you're not learning.
Right.
And if you're not learning, you're creating a problem. And then finally, and we've got to stop, and that is touch.
Yes.
You know what?
And sometimes one person is better at it than the other. I don't know if you remember, but I had to teach you how to hug me. You do not like to hug. You don't want people to hug you. And when you'd hug me, I'd get this, like I was a pal or chum or something.
I don't hug pals and chums, but anyway.
That's what I felt like. So I had to teach you how to hug me, and then you'd be like, that wasn't enough. And I'd say, nope, you have to do it longer. You have to do it longer. So yes, touch is important.
Absolutely. And in 1 Corinthians, we're reminded of that.
Yeah.
And so let your spouse know that you're there, and then let them know that you're thankful they're there.
Yeah.
And it'll make all the difference in the world and what you're dealing with and what you're talking about. Well, Joy, I'll give you any concluding thoughts that you might want to make before we wrap up.
Well, just laugh together, pray together, and love each other because we are each other's gift from God to the other one. And I know we're talking about Valentine's Day and marriage and all that, but can I just say how much I love Crossroads as well? I think this is the best church in the world, and they support families, they support marriage, they support each other, And I'm just thankful God put us together here at Crossroads
Absolutely.
to minister.
And that's a great point. We don't just talk about the importance of family. On
No.
Wednesday nights, we actually run classes on the importance of family.
Yeah.
And so I think people need to know and understand that it is who we are. It's what we are. It's what we are individually. It's what we are as a faith family. And so with that, I just want to thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Again, reality is what it's all about. And we thank you for being here. Join us, find us, like us, and follow us on whatever your favorite social media app is. But each week, we're going to come back with the reality is, and it's found in the way we live life and the faith we have as we walk with God. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next week.